He has a total, absolute understanding of who Putin is.
What does that even mean?
They're worse than Putin.
3 reasons why Putin's regime won't fall anytime soon. With the Russian-Ukrainian conflict now 10 months old, without any sign of a decisive victory for either side, Western observers are focusing their attention on the shortcomings of Russia's armed forces, the Kremlin's internal problems, and the perceived weakening of President Putin's power. They are clearly counting on these factors to somehow force the Russian leader to end the military conflict in Ukraine. In this regard, many even began to count the days until the collapse of the regime in Moscow. The truth is, however, that at best the thesis that Putin could be removed from power at any moment is an example of wishful thinking. There are at least 3 reasons for this.
I'm listening.
First of all, the general situation in Russia really got worse. The partial mobilization to replenish the composition of combat units in Ukraine, the first in the country since the end of World War II, caused many men of military age to leave it. Soldiers on the front line complain of a lack of equipment, insufficient training, and poor food. There are anti-war protests in the streets, and acts of sabotage have become more frequent in some cities. But all this is not something new for Russia. By their mentality, Russians are very tolerant of authoritarian government actions, various coercive mechanisms, and lack of order in solving current problems. When it comes to the Russian government, nothing happens easily, is organized, and without problems. The latter is a harsh reality and has existed for at least several decades, especially in the armed forces. At the same time, the current level of dissent among Russians is unlikely to reach a critical mass that will lead to a nationwide revolt. Fear remains an important factor. Ever since Soviet times and long before that, the rulers tend to firmly suppress such manifestations. Nor is there a clear process for replacing the current regime with a better one, at least by Western standards. Although Putin's approval rating has fallen by about 8% since March, 75% of Russians continue to approve and support his actions, and 78.7% trust him as their leader. And this is data from various Russian-based polling agencies, considered reliable by Western analysts. Second, claims of dissent in Putin's inner circle are either unreliable or exaggerated. For example, it was reported that in October, President Joe Biden received an intelligence report containing classified information indicating that one of Putin's inner circle attributed the bad development of the military conflict in Ukraine directly to the Russian president. Western intelligence services interpreted this information as a sign of a rebellion in the Kremlin. It is unlikely, however, that U.S. intelligence actually penetrated Putin's inner circle and obtained classified information directly from someone who was part of it. Putin's inner circle is extremely narrow and includes trusted former colleagues from his time in the KGB or from his time as a high-ranking official in St. Petersburg. Because of their presence in Putin's inner circle, these loyal apparatchiks have a much more comfortable life than the CIA in America could offer them if they were forced to leave Russia if they agreed to spy for the US government. At the same time, the risks of exposing them are too great. If such a person is caught by the Russian services in treason, he will be liquidated immediately. People from Putin's closest circle are under constant surveillance and protection. Their contacts are controlled by a special technical monitoring system, a complex of technical means and measures aimed at the implementation of operative investigative actions in the spheres of telephone, mobile communications and radio communications. Not thirdly, the probability of a coup or riot in Russia is very small. Putin did not invent this military conflict himself, and he himself is not an anomaly, but a standard for a Russian leader. He is the typical Russian authoritarian leader. The strategy for conducting hostilities in Ukraine, including attacks on civilian objects, was created, albeit on his orders, by the General Staff. The destruction of vital infrastructure, due to which 80% of the territory of Ukraine was left without heating, electricity, and drinking water, is the result of the so-called strategic operation to strike the enemy's critical facilities. Western analysts tend to project Western norms of behavior onto Russia and the Putin regime and draw conclusions based on our own way of thinking. In the intelligence community, this is called mirroring. However, the truth is that Putin and his associates, as well as Russians in general, do not think and act like Americans. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.